Shamima, do you think she should ever come back to this country?
Well, I really don't. I must say it was Shamima's decision to go out in the first place. It was her decision to tear up her British passport. And it was her decision to join a death cult in the desert that not only has ruined the lives of countless Brits in places like Manchester, London Bridge, but also devastated Syria and Iraq as well. I was privileged to spend a lot of time with the Yazidi people in Syria, and something like 7,000 young girls, some as young as 3 years old, are still missing. And the scars that this terror group has left on the region will take many generations to heal.
So, I mean, it's very interesting you mentioned, I'm assuming you're talking about some of the Yazidi girls out there, Yazidi girls, who, I mean, as you point out, some of them are still missing. And we tend to forget about them. We talk a lot about Shamima and how she may have been groomed as an East London schoolgirl, 15 years old, etc., etc. But we do tend to forget that the likes of Shamima's husband, not saying him in particular, but that, you know, ISIS were literally raping 10-year-old Yazidi girls. And no one talks about that. But you were there, you actually witnessed this sort of thing going on. Can you just tell us a bit the real horrors of what went on and Shamima was party to?
Well, ISIS committed genocide. The Yazidi people, they've suffered a number of genocides over the last sort of 500 years. And in particular, ISIS not only damaged and destroyed their community, but also ruined the lives of Christians, of Arab communities as well. Her husband is a terrorist. He's also in prison at the moment. He's a trained killer. And even the accusations leveled against Shamima by the Kurds contain things like the fact that she may have been part of the Hizbah, which is the female political police wing, I should say, of the ISIS state, which committed executions, beat people. There was even an accusation that she was seen sewing a suicide vest onto a suicide bomber in Syria. So MI5 have got it right as far as I'm concerned. They've literally called her a real and credible threat. So let's take their word for it. Let's listen to the experts and actually, as you say, start thinking more about the victims of ISIS rather than ISIS themselves.
Now, was it Sajid Javid who did say that, you know, if you knew what I knew about what had gone on and what Shamima and other ISIS brides, and the bride word just sounds completely wrong, doesn't it, had been involved with, you would never have her back. I mean, that makes my blood run cold, to be honest with you, because I think, well, what do we not know about her? What do you think he's referring to when he says things like that?
Just those accusations that I mentioned. The Kurds are the group, the SDF, the Syrian Democratic Forces. They're the group that are currently holding Shamima Begum in a prison camp in northern Syria. They're also holding her husband as well, and thousands, so I think something like 70, 80,000 ISIS prisoners in all. They know, because they defeated them. They lost 12,000 fighters in the battle over the last 4 years. They know all the intelligence on what they captured in places like Raqqa and other places as well. They knew what the records of these ISIS prisoners are. And they're the people who leveled the accusation of her being in the Hizbah. They are leveling the accusation that she was seen sewing suicide bombs onto people. So again, that will have to stand up in court somewhere, these accusations that these people have put against them. But again, it's MI5. It's our authorities here that have access to this information, and we need to start thinking about. We need to put the British public first, basically, because at the end of the day, we have already been hit in places like Manchester and London Bridge. What do we owe Shamima Begum? What we really owe to people is to keep them safe, for husbands and wives to kiss each other before they go on the underground, for parents to drop their kids off at concerts and know that they'll see the smiling faces when they go and pick them up again. That's what we should be thinking about, not whether Shamima Begum is a victim or not. Because as we said at the beginning of this discussion, thousands of people in Syria and Iraq have had their lives upended and destroyed, and we really aren't doing enough for them. So that's the conversation I want to be having.
Yeah, I mean, we all remember little Safi Roussos, who was at the Manchester Arena concert. She was 8 years old, Macer, and, you know, her family had to fight for legal aid for help. financially, and we are funding Shamima Begum's legal case to come back to the UK. So, I mean, if she did come back to the UK, and obviously she's lost her appeal at the moment, but if she did come back and faced a trial, what do you think would happen to her then? Do you think that she would then have to be monitored by the security services? Because we don't even know what we could actually charge her with, do we?
Well, absolutely. Well, let's look at some other cases. In the past, we have had ISIS fighters return from the front line. I think the maximum jail sentences that I can think of, the few cases I can think of, were around sort of 4 to 5 years. And that's exactly what I'd expect Shamima to get as well. She'd possibly get out of jail even sooner than that with good behavior. And that's the trouble. It's merely a slap on the wrist, considering the intensity of the crimes that the Islamic State committed over the years in Syria and Iraq. There's also the fact that the British taxpayer will pay hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pounds for these legal challenges. But the ongoing care of Shamima Begum, from police protection to ongoing legal challenges and everything else, will again drag this on for many, many years. And what I'm more concerned about is Shamima Begum is the tip of the spear. There are far worse people in the camps in Syria and Iraq than Shamima Begum, far more violent people. And if we allow Shamima Begum back, it basically opens the door to many other people, far worse than her, to potentially challenge the legal system here as well. So this could get a lot worse, basically. And as I said, we need to put the British public first and make sure, by far, our priority is keeping them safe.
Yeah, I mean, Macer, you are, as I said when we introduced you, you are in Ukraine at the moment. I mean, obviously, what the Ukrainian people are going through, witnessing terrible atrocities. How does the atrocities that is happening in Europe on our doorstep compare to what happened in Syria, what you witnessed in Syria?
Well, they're different conflicts in many respects. I joined the SDF, the Syrian Democratic Forces in Syria, because I was motivated by the terrible harm against the Yazidis and the Christians in Syria. In Ukraine, I've joined the Ukrainian army as a volunteer to fight back against Russia, because Ukraine is a sovereign state on the edge of Europe, a fledgling state that's only been independent since the 90s, and they deserve our respect. They deserve freedom, and this barbaric invasion by Putin and his thugs is something that I think all internationals and all people who believe in internationalism should push back and fight against. But the stakes here are much higher, and the conflict is much wider. I think the Kurds lost 12,000 fighters in 4 years. In Ukraine, I think Russia is losing something like nearly 800 people per day. In the last couple of weeks in Bakhmut, they've lost 10,000 people in a couple of weeks. So the scope of this conflict is far wider, and the risks to European security and our own security in the UK are actually larger in Ukraine. So we need a win here too.